Here we are. That's right. It's me, Drew Dougherty. It's John Harris, and it's you checking us out. This is In the Lab, presented by Xfinity. The week after the Super Bowl, the day before, offensive coordinator Nick Caley is introduced to the public through a press conference at NRG Stadium. It's going to be him. It's going to be D'Amico Ryans. John, I'm excited about that. Excited to hear from the new guy. And I was very surprised by what I saw in the Super Bowl. I was one of those, and we said it on the show last week. I was like, the Eagles are going up against Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Phil Jackson, and the Eagles thrashed them. However, I do think the Chiefs had a bad game at the very worst time.
They did.
But one of the things that sort of confirmed what I've been doing in my nerdery, as we are here in the offseason, mock draft simulators, lots of times, man, there's a clump of dudes when I do a mock draft simulator, and we'll do one of these next week maybe together.
Yep.
We'll do about 3 of them throughout this whole process. But there's a clump of them at 25 where if the trades that are proposed to me don't look like, I'm getting what I want, it always seems like there's some variation of a choice between Walter Nolan, sometimes Emeka Buka, sometimes the defensive tackle from Oregon. And every so often, there's a wild...
Derek Harmon.
Yeah, Derek Harmon. And then every so often, the defensive tackle from Michigan, Mason Graham, drops all the way down. I don't see that happening, but he drops all the way down the Texans. It's like you run to the podium and hand that one in. But it comes down to essentially a good defensive tackle, because there's a few others at that spot, or Emeka Egbuka. Now, seeing what we saw on Sunday night in the Super Bowl just kind of confirms, like, yes, do the Texans need to get better at pass protection? Sure. Mm-hmm. But if there's not a Tyler Booker ready there, are you better served by taking one of those defensive tackles that are available? And I kind of think yes. And I think you pair them up with the, not pair them, but you add them to the mix of the guys you have out on the edge who are very good, also very promising down the line. I think you could get very close to what you saw from the Eagles defense if you hit with some of those guys.
I think you can thank the Eagles for helping with the argument. Because I had this talk with Seth. I was this was just after I'd gotten back from the Senior Bowl. And I can't remember who it was. Somebody had put out there Kenneth Grant to the Texans, the other Michigan defensive tackle.
He's intriguing. He's somebody that I wind up taking when I move back a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, very. I think 25, I kind of go the other way, Drew. I think in due time, I think you won't be able to get him at 25. But the point being, I know there are a lot of people like, you got to do offensive line. You got to do offensive line. Now look, there are other ways that you can go about getting players and bringing them in. And I've said, and I'm gone on record saying, I think if the Texans are going to spend money, I think it might be at one of those interior offensive line positions. I think that's where they spend the money to get somebody that's maybe ready-made to plop right in and let's go. I think with what they have at wide receiver, with Nico Collins in particular, what they have at other positions, even defensive tackle, I think they could. Now, some of this depends on what happens with Foley and what happens with Mario Edwards. If you can bring both of them back, then I still think you have to add a stud, a dude, to the defensive line room, a young dude. I mean, that's Mario's been in the league a little while. Foley's been around for a little while. Even Kurt Heinrich is going into year 4. I mean, guys have been around for a little bit. So I think they need a little infusion of some size, some agility, some strength as defensive linemen. And then you just point to, well, look what the Eagles did. Look how they did it. And the one thing I like about what the Eagles did, and I don't think this is brought up a lot, the Eagles don't just have defensive tackles. You look at Jordan Davis, and he's like 350. You look at Jalen Carter, he's like 315. Then you look at Milton Williams, who comes in the game, he's 285. Like, maybe. By the end of the season, he's probably like
Baskin Robbins.
80.
It's like Baskin
so it's
Robbins.
Like they hit you with different flavors and different types. And I think that's the key, that to keep an offensive line off balance, it's different kind. And I think with Foley and Mario and Settle, they're not all the same guy. And I thought that made for their success and helped make for their success in 2024. But I think you add a stud that's, 305, 310 can move. Even a guy like Kenneth Grant, you know me, I like my defensive tackles beefier than most. So if Kenneth Grant comes to the party, he's 330, 335. I think the Michigan roster has him at 340. But that dude can move. I mean, he can get up and go. And you think about, you still got to win a division, right? Well, the team you got to beat, Indianapolis. What do they want to do? They want to pound Jonathan Taylor and run Anthony Richardson. Well, if your guys inside are great, if you're going to win the AFC, you got to beat the Chiefs. Where do you have to be great up the middle, because that's where Patrick Mahomes, he likes to escape through that. So I think defensive tackle makes a lot of sense. And this is a deep defensive tackle draft. In fact, I was just going through my draft database today, kind of revising and getting guys in and out, guys that were, moved on to 2026, get them out of there, guys that maybe declared I wasn't expecting to put them in there. And Drew, you just, I go down the list, I'm like, could you see this guy playing for the Texans in 2025? Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Tyreek Williams, Derek Harmon, who we mentioned, Joshua Farmer, Florida State, Alfred Collins, Texas, TJ Sanders, South Carolina, Deion Walker, 6'6", 348, Vernon Broughton, Texas, Jordan Fields,
You like
Maryland.
all those guys, huh?
You give me any of those guys.
Nice.
Any of those
That's
guys.
good, they fall all throughout
different.
the draft. Yeah, when you're doing these drafts, which
absolutely.
But yeah, it's
absolutely,
it's fun. That's exciting because it's a position that, like you said, it's not an extreme need. It's not like a glaring hole, but if you are able to get somebody like that, you're strengthening what's, the defensive front is a strength. That is really, it pushes you one step closer to getting where you want to go ultimately. Okay, so we just brought something up there on the flip side, offensive line. Pass protection was not what it needed to be last year. Just wasn't. Everyone knows that. Everyone said that. From the very top of the building, we're saying, players said it. We're not breaking any news here. But with all that in mind, with the draft approaching, true or false, if you did not draft an offensive lineman in April, you'd still be just fine, or you could be just fine because of the change offensively with Kaylee and the personnel you already have in place and some personnel you could add through free agency. I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, you'd like to draft a great offensive lineman or two, but it's not necessarily a must, is it?
It's not. I think it's the easiest thing for fans to see is, personnel changes. It's easy. They're not going to, even us, we're not going to be able to know all the scheme things that they do, but we know that they're going to do different things to be able to protect. Even in the game against Kansas City, even a couple of games prior, you could see the Texans. I could see things that were different that the Texans were doing in their pass protection that made it a little bit better. Now, look, CJ got mauled in the fourth quarter, but that was because we were down in that game, and the Chiefs are now pinning their ears back, and they started getting hot, and we get desperate, and you know how it goes. But for the first 3 quarters of that game, one of the things that they were doing pretty well was picking up the stunts. They were picking up the blitzes. Not every time, but doing a better job of it than they did in the game in December. Prior to that game, the game against the Chargers, I thought the pass protection from the second quarter on was much, much better. They were doing things a little differently. So personnel is the easiest thing to see. Well, that guy's different. That coach is different. Well, now there's a new coach. There's an offensive coordinator who's going to be different. What he brings in Nick Caley to pass protection and how they go about it, I don't think any of us are going to really truly understand. The proof is going to be in the pudding. But new coaches and new schemes, new ideas always make good players better.
Yeah.
I do think that, I said earlier, free agency, I think is, if they're going to spend some money, I think that's where it might be. But I still think that a young offensive lineman, look, they've drafted, let's go through it, the last 2 years ago, it was Juice and Jarrett, right? Then last year it was Blake, and then later it was Ladarius Henderson. They've drafted some offensive linemen, and they've drafted them a little bit later in the draft. I mean, Blake was a second rounder, but Blake's going to turn into a starter. I think he's going to end up being the starter right tackle. I mean, we'll see how they put it all together. But Blake, I thought, did a pretty decent job, except for one, sack he gave up to Chris Jones or Karlaftis, one or the other. But either way, I think Blake's the right fit. So they've kind of done what we've talked about, and that is draft a little bit later some guys that might have some upside. They have some elite trait, like they have long arms or they're big, they can move, they're smart, whatever. I think that they still need to draft at least somebody. Now, they don't have as much draft capital as we've had in the past. And so that is something to keep an eye on. How do they increase that draft capital? Moving up, moving down, picking up other picks, all that kind of stuff. But I think if they stick at 6 picks, I think it'll be one offensive lineman. But I do think with the change of Nick Caley, Cole Popovich moving to the offensive line coaching position, and the change that goes with having them be the shot callers, added to, I think, some free agent dollars for somebody coming in, and then maybe a day 3 pick, might be a day 3 pick. I'd be okay with that. But round 3 and beyond draft pick, I think you could start to look at it and go, okay, I can kind of see how this is going to come together in the offensive line.
So that's a great answer to what my question was, which was essentially true or false. The Texans must draft an offensive lineman, or true or false. The Texans will be okay, possibly, if they don't draft one. So we talked about it last week. I did the mock draft roundup, and most experts, the majority of the experts, the quarter, or at least a quarter of 24 experts, had the Texans taking Alabama's Tyler Booker, the guard.
Right.
Really impressive guy. And somebody you said probably is not going to be at 25. So as a flip to what my previous question was, if the Texans were to take a guy like that, and I tweeted that out, that he's the pick at 25 by some of these experts, and I got a handful of responses and tweets saying, don't do that. They've done that. They've taken guys in the Okay, just because you took a guy at a position it didn't work out a few years back doesn't mean you don't do it again.
Right.
So if Sam Bowie was your choice in 1984, was it 84 or 85 anyways? 84. He didn't work out for you immediately. He did wind up becoming an all-star a couple times, but he wasn't Jordan or Akeem. Does that mean you don't draft Shaquille O'Neal a few years later? No.
Right.
Or
exactly.
So on and so forth. So
here's one, Drew. Here's one, Drew.
Yeah.
So things didn't work out with Deshaun Watson. His agent is David Mulugetis. Does that mean you're not going to draft C.J. Stroud?
CJ's been awesome.
Yeah. So look, some of those things, that I think people get, don't draft an Ohio State quarterback. You can't draft a Jeff Tedford quarterback. Oh, that guy is just going to be this. He's just going to be this. Yeah, look.
Don't take a Texas Tech quarterback.
Yeah, every situation you have to treat individually and independently. And I think when you look at Booker, first of all, with some of the guys that were drafted in the offensive line, it wasn't the same group you have now. It wasn't the same coaching staff you have now. It wasn't the same philosophy you have now. So those things might not be that important. I'll tell you one thing that's hugely important, and that's being swarmy. And when I was at the Senior Bowl, I don't know if I told you this. I don't know if we talked about this, Drew. When I was at the Senior Bowl, I talked to a staffer from Alabama, somebody that knows the Alabama program really well.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we went through this, but he spoke glowingly. Like, he didn't say the word swarm. He didn't have to. It's like all the things that just get added, to the mix. You go, okay, well, that fits. And look, not every player at Alabama is that way, but if you're going to get to Alabama for the most part, you probably have those tendencies. And it was interesting talking to him about Will Anderson, Henry To'oTo'o, and the guys that are at Alabama. And it was like, yep, same sort of thought process, same sort of way he goes through things. And I think Tyler Booker, and that's the thing. And I say this a lot. Oh, you drafted an offensive guard. That's not the way I look at it. I look at it as you drafted Tyler Booker. That's different. That's not, we just didn't draft an offensive guard. Because I think that gets lost on people. A lot of people last year were like, oh, we got to draft the tight end. We got to have a tight end. They were like all over me about a tight end. And I was just like, I didn't like a lot of the tight ends where people wanted to draft a tight end. I'm like, okay, you want a tight end here? Who do you want? Tell me who you want. Then I'll talk to you. Because if we get to the fourth round and Kate Stover's still there, that's what I want. And thank God Nick Caserio knew that too. And Nick and D'Amico go out and get Kate Stover, who I think is going to end up taking year 2 to a different level. I'm really excited about what Cade's going to do. I think
awesome.
Cade can be healthy. Now he kind of knows the game. I think that is a swarmy dude. So to me, Tyler Booker isn't just an offensive guard being picked at number 25. Like, he is an absolute stud. So did it not work with other guys? Did it not work with other first-round offensive guards? Maybe not. But you have to look at each case individually and why those things and why those situations didn't work out. And then you can utilize, okay, this didn't work out because of A, B, and C. Okay, we're going to try not to make those mistakes, but we might draft an offensive guard again, and we might find those things. We might miss again. I mean, hell, the Browns have been drafting quarterbacks for forever, and they still don't get it right. So from that standpoint, the Tyler Booker one is the one that I don't know the right way of saying this, but I get kind of hot bothered about it because of what you said, Drew, and the way you went about it, because that's the way I hear it in my head. Oh, they drafted a guard. My God. And look, offensive guard's not sexy, but you know what? If an offensive guard that you draft keeps number 7 upright all year long, watch how sexy this offense is going to be. That'll get you happy.
So let's end with this. Since we do dorky things on this podcast, I'm going to leave with the number 4. I texted you and Mark about this last week. I was doing some research. 4 sacks was kind of like the magic number with the Texans last year.
Yeah.
When Stroud got sacked 4 times or more in a game, the Texans lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times.
Wow.
8 times, including the playoffs. So 7 of the regular season losses.
So more than 4.
4 or more times. 4 or more times.
4 more times.
They won 2 games where he got sacked 4 times. They beat the Colts in the first week of the season.
Yep, remember that.
And they beat the Dolphins later on in the season.
That's right. Yeah.
They lost 1 game where he did not get sacked 4 times. They only lost 1 time. That was to the Chiefs in the regular season.
Oh,
He got sacked twice in that game. He got hit, though, 11 times.
He did, yeah.
He got hit 11 times in that game. He got hit 11 times at the Jets, which is the really memorable one because he got sacked 8 times, hit 11 times against the Jets, but he got hit as many times against the Jets as he did against the Chiefs in the regular season game. And he got hit the most all season long was in the finale. 8 sacks, 14 quarterback hits, but 4, that was the number. If you stayed under that number, Texans typically won. Miraculously, they did not have a game all season long where they kept a clean sheet. Now, Stroud did not get sacked in the season finale at the Titans, but he only played that 1 series. Davis Mills got sacked once. I know for sure once, maybe twice, but that's a pretty wild statistic. And I think that's probably going to be a statistic that gets improved upon pretty prominently, pretty importantly this season. I don't think you can go through without getting a clean sheet in at least 1 game this season. I mean, even those worst, remember 17, 18?
Oh, God.
Wrecked. There were still some games where he didn't get sacked at all, and that didn't happen this year.
Right.
So I think that changes for the better in 2025.
So to your point earlier, Drew, you're talking about, okay, using that and building off of that and going, okay, Drew and John, how can that be? How can they get better from a pass protection standpoint and not have the magic number be 4? The magic number needs to be 2. How's it going to get better?
Yeah.
We mentioned him. Okay, Nick Caley's taking over as the offensive coordinator. Here, I'll put it this way. This is where we have hope. Nick Caley's taken over as the offensive coordinator. He's been a tight ends coach for the Patriots and the Rams, so he knows both the run game and the pass game. Cole Popovich is taking over. I know they were very, very high on Cole, and I'm excited to see what he's able to bring to it. I know a lot of people are like, well, he was here last year. How come they weren't any better? Look, there's a total difference when you are a subordinate versus the guy. Now, puts a lot of pressure on you.
Chain of command has an effect on everything, whether it's football teams, the Army, CEO, businesses, all that stuff.
Whatever. And Caley and Popovich have worked together, and I think there's synergy in that. There's free agent dollars. There's the draft. There's personnel. But one of the things I think we didn't bring up is CJ Stroud himself. The ability in his third year to process things faster, even faster than he did this past year.
Yeah.
That's going to help. Like just seeing different things, and we'll see how it goes as far as what he's able to do in Nick Caley's offense. Like, is he able in this offense to go, hey, there's a lot of dudes over here. Let's run over there. And let's just change the run play. Now, I know in other offenses, you're not really allowed to do that too much, or it's not encouraged for you to do that, whatever. And I'm making a very simple example. I don't know where it sat with Bobby. I know there was all that talk with Matt Schaub, with Coach Kubiak's offense, so you couldn't change much. You couldn't change at the line of scrimmage. We'll see what it's like for Nick Caley, and CJ. But sometimes it can be as simple as that. Like, hey, wait a second. I see something over here. And one of my favorite stories of all time, I heard a Virginia Tech coach. His name is Ricky Bussell. He got all excited. Football coaches, they talk and all this, football ease and all this kind of stuff. And he got all excited because he saw his quarterback come up to the line of scrimmage and change the play and run the play the other way. And so they ran it for a touchdown. The quarterback comes back over, and Coach Bussell is all excited, man. He's just jumping up and down. He's like, oh, man, you saw the linebacker over here, and they were in the A-gap and this. And he said, no, Coach. I saw a bunch of MFers over here and not over here, so I changed the play and went there. And I was like, sometimes it can be that simple to do things like that. But we'll see, CJ has that football IQ to be able to do that. And I think that's going to be one of the things of pass protection that is going to change. We've got a pass play called. It's 2nd and 7. But they're in a front that looks like we can run the ball. Let's check to a run. Let's see what we can do here. Now, again, I don't know how that's going to work in the Caley system. I don't know how it worked in the Slowick system, but maybe that's going to be there. And maybe it's going to be there because CJ is going to have the wherewithal, obviously, in his third year to be able to do it. And you add that into everything, instead of 2nd and 7, it being a look that gets pressure, produces a pressure. Maybe it's a run you pop for 5-6 yards, and now it's 3rd and 1. So there's a lot of things you can have hope about going into the 2025 season, but the pass protection will be a whole heck of a lot better for a number of these reasons, including an even better run game. If your run game is even better, then maybe that gives play action more opportunities, move the pocket, all that kind of stuff. So I think there are a lot of reasons for hope. Now it's just time for all those to come to fruition. And so the sack total drops from whatever it was to 18, 19, 20, something like that, where you're giving up 1-2 a game. You can live with that. Giving up 4 a game, that kind of thing. Then that can't be our magic number moving forward, Drew.
I say magic. It's magic in a bad way. 4. Ooh.
I know. Exactly.
Hey, your Bussell story reminds me. We got time. Yeah, let's do it. We got time for one Mike Leach story. So Mike Leach was very stubborn about certain things, and sometimes the Red Raiders they didn't come up, and I think some of that sometimes was because of him being stubborn. But one thing in which he was not stubborn was letting his quarterback have the option to change plays at the line of scrimmage, pre-snap, all that stuff. And Graham Harrell, who was there he started for 3 years for the Red Raiders and was quarterback of that fantastic 2008 team that went, I think, sort of 11-1 or whatever. But Harrell changed plays quite a bit. And somebody asked him, Leach, about that one time. They're like, well, how come you don't call the plays more or make sure you're the one caller, make sure what you want out there gets called? And he was very matter of fact, he's like, well, because I'm not the one seeing what's at the line. He sees it the right way, and he sees it differently than the way I see it. I'm at ground level from the side. He's the one seeing it. Plus, I don't throw the football either. So, and it was just like the perfect Mike Leach answer. He's like, the guy most equipped to make the decision makes it. And they did some pretty good things when Harrell was doing that. Well, let's do this again next week. Like I kind of semi-teased, let's do a mock draft simulation before you leave for the combine. We'll do one of those.
Yeah.
So
let's do it
for the Texans. They have 6 picks going in, but you and I are going to jiggle that around. I'm almost positive, because the guy that does do it for real, Nick Caserio, jiggles things around all the time. He's not gone through a Texans draft without making multiple trades. So I imagine that's going to be the case for us, but I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate you, John, and we appreciate you checking us out. The 3 of us together. Wow. What a trio. What a trinity. What a tripod. Whatever try you want to use, we were there. Take care. So long. This has been In the Lab, presented by Xfinity.